Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, Wales, romance and murder. It's my weekly wrap up. So this is a week that's been dominated by one book, that book being Moby Dick, which took me I think 3 or 4 days to read. So I typically read quite short, quite easy to read books, and Moby Dick is neither of those things. But it was a fascinating experience. I really enjoyed it. So, as usual with these videos, I'll talk first about the books I've read, talk about what I'm going to be reading in the week ahead, and then talk about channel stuff, just in case there's anything you've missed on the channel. So the first book I read, which I think I was reading when I did this video last week, was The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, which is very difficult to say. I just tripped over it about 3 times. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein, which I really liked. So it's definitely a book that is more about ideas than it is about characters and story, albeit the central character, the narrator, is a really interesting character. But I really enjoyed it. So we read it for the Birth Year Book Tag reading group, which I host on my Discord. And I always forget to mention my Discord, but if you're new to the channel and you fancy kind of chatting about other stuff, there's a link to my Discord in all of the video descriptions and in the About Me section as well. So yeah, we just chat about stuff over there. So yeah, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress is a kind of a classic science fiction novel about a colony on the moon, which is basically there to supply material and food for Earth. The people being quite exploited by the system that they're part of, and it's about a revolution in that colony against the tyranny, if you like, of control by Earth. And it was really interesting. So it's the first half of the book is kind of the lead up to that revolution, and the second half is the revolution and what happens thereafter. But the central character is a really interesting guy who's he's like a computer programmer, whose job it is to program and like repair the central computer in the colony that runs everything, which gives him a bit of an upper hand when it comes to the revolution. But what's fascinating about the book is its kind of prescience in terms of kind of multiculturalism, AI, all sorts of different things felt like they were, things that had come to pass, or something similar had come to pass since Heinlein wrote the book. There's a lot of stuff, like political stuff in there about kind of libertarianism and things like that, which appealed to me less. But overall, I really enjoyed it. It's written in a very interesting style as well. So the central character, who's the narrator, writes in an unusual way, which kind of is a kind of mashup of lots of different dialects and things like that. The influences of lots of different countries you can see in the dialogue and the narration. So yeah, it's a really interesting and enjoyable book. I did like it a lot. It's one of my dad's favourite books. So I was pleased to read it and discuss it with him as well. But yeah, we've had a good discussion about it over on the Discord too, which is continuing. So after that, I dove into Moby Dick, no pun intended. So I did put up a video yesterday where I talk about the fact I'm going to try and read the 12 classics that Michael K. Vaughan mentioned in a video he did the other day as must-reads. And Moby Dick is the first of those that I've tackled. So I did it as a buddy read with one from Plagued by Visions. I am going to do a full review of it, and I'll do full reviews of all 12 of these classic books that I read. But I thought it was great. I thought it was unlike any book I've ever read, I think. Which, given how old it is and what an influence it has had on literature, I thought was interesting. I thought it's strange that there aren't more books like it. And I think the reason for that is that what Herman Melville does in it, where he kind of mashes together a quite gripping and thrilling storyline about the hunt for this huge whale with loads of really low-level, intricate detail about the whaling industry. It's a really hard thing to do well. So I think it must be an incredibly difficult thing as a writer to make that work, and yet Melville makes it work in this book. So I thought it was fantastic, and I will give my full thoughts soon. So anyway, after Moby Dick, which, as I said at the start, is very long, so it's like 650 pages long, and it's a heavy read. You know, it's 150 years old, so the language is 150 years old. Plus, it goes into, you know, all different sorts of tangents. So it was a heavy read. So I needed something lighter after that. So I read Appalachian Prey by Debbie Herbert, my first book for Autumn Amour, which I really enjoyed. This was a lot of fun. So I just finished this morning. So it's set in a place called Lavender Mountain. I don't know if Lavender Mountain is a real place or not, in the Appalachians. So a poor kind of rural area. It's about this young woman whose family are kind of on the wrong side of the law, but she's escaped the town and then comes back. And what was really interesting about this book is, when I started reading it, after about kind of 30 pages or so, I almost felt like I was reading the second book in a series, because there's so much stuff that has happened just before this book starts that the author does a great job of describing, but it almost felt like I'd missed a book. But I persevered, I checked and I hadn't, and I persevered with it, and everything becomes clear and it works really well. But yeah, there's this big backstory about how this central character, Lila, who's come back to town, has had a relationship with one of the sheriff's deputies, and then they've split up, and she's now pregnant with his child, but hasn't told him that yet. And then you've also got all this backstory about her family, who are moonshiners, who are on the wrong side of the law, and her father gets killed right at the start of the book, and that kind of sets off a chain of events that sees her teaming up with this sheriff's deputy again, and the two of them naturally falling in love again, but also a load of backstory about her family. There's a couple of unsolved murders from like decades previously which are brought into it. There's more murders that happen, in the course of the book. So it was just a really gripping, enjoyable suspense novel. The romance element of it almost felt secondary to the suspense. So there's definitely a romance angle there, but it felt more like a suspense novel with a bit of romance than a romance novel with a bit of suspense. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was gripping. There was a decent mystery. Lila as the central character is really determined and great as she looks on the cover there. So pregnant with a shotgun. I really enjoyed it. And there's Debbie Herbert's written a couple of other books in this series, and I think I'm going to check those out as well. So I think they're set in the same place, but potentially with different characters. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. So this was for Autumn Amour, which is the romance reading event in September, being created by the Bookish Rights and hosted by a bunch of different people. The first week you were to choose a book that was either contemporary or historical. So this was a contemporary pick for that, and I enjoyed it very much. And then after that, this morning I picked up Psycho by Robert Bloch, which I have read before, but 25, 30 years ago. So obviously, I've read it before, but also the film is pretty faithful to the book. So, and I've seen the film 3 or 4 times, and everyone knows the film and the twists and things like that. So there were no surprises in this book, but it was still fantastic. So I picked it up this morning after finishing Appalachian Prey and read all of it in like 2 hours. It's incredibly gripping. It's really, it's really well done. You know the twists, but Bloch, kind of introduces them and teases them out in such a way that there's still a real pleasure in seeing them being played out in the book. The murder scenes are brief but really effective, and the insight you get into Norman Bates's mind, which which clearly you don't get so much of in the film, is fantastically done. So I've no doubt it's very dated in terms of its depiction of mental illness and things like that. But it was just a really, really enjoyable book. I absolutely loved it. Really, really impressed. I definitely really need to read more Robert Bloch. I read when I was younger, around the time I first read Psycho. I also read Psycho 2 and a Jack the Ripper book he wrote, which I forget the name of, and really enjoyed both of those. But yeah, I definitely need to read more of him, because this was really fantastic. Really, really enjoyed it. So both this and Moby Dick were 5-star reads from me. Appalachian Prey and Moon is a Harsh Mistress. See, I've failed to say it again. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress were both 4-star reads. So it's been a really, really good reading week for me. I've absolutely loved it. Moving on, so we are into week 2 of Autumn Amour. So I need to read something which is either sweet or spicy. So as I said in my TBR video, I've chosen this. Sweet Temptation by Laurien Blair from the Silhouette Desire range, which I think means it's a bit spicy, but it's also sweet because it's about a woman who runs a sweet shop. And then after that, I think I'm going to dive into The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler for Dictember, which is also a reread. So I read it a few years ago. But yeah, very much looking forward to reading that again. And we'll be reading it in this lovely Library of America edition of Chandler's stories and early novels. So yeah, very much looking forward to that too. And beyond that, I don't know. I will see what takes my fancy from my TBR once I finish The Big Sleep. So in terms of channel stuff, then I've done over the last week. I did the video on classics, which I've talked about. So reading the 12 classics that Michael had recommended. I've done an Ask Criminoli. I did a Sunday Bollocks video about kids and books, which was a response video to a few different videos that were floating about on BookTube. I did a review of a vintage alligator novel, horror novel called Death Tour, which I really enjoyed. I did the Book Snob book tag, and I did a video about my 10 picks of literary fiction books that I really enjoyed. In the week ahead, I'm going to be doing the Travelling with Books tag that was created by Gina Stania. I haven't quite decided exactly what I'm going to do for Sunday Bollocks tomorrow, but I think I'm going to do something about reading for entertainment versus reading for other reasons. And then also review-wise in the week ahead, I'll be doing a review of Moby Dick if I can collect my thoughts on it. And I'll be doing a review of Psycho as well, because I enjoyed both those books so much. I really want to talk about them a bit more. So as always, thanks very much for watching. Do let me know in the comments what you've been reading this week, particularly if you're taking part in either Dictember or Autumn Amour. And yeah, thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you're safe and well. Hope you read good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.